Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
The Holiday Inn, so that would be C. Okay, perfect. And then just so we can again get comfortable with the clickers, no judgment, favorite ice cream, just tell us really quick. We just have a couple test questions we're trying out here. Perfect. And then we'll go ahead and do gender, and then we have just two more. Okay. And then age. Perfect. And then let us know if you participated in the survey in June. Give it a minute here. We're going to go ahead and jump into the survey background. You can ask questions as we go through some of this. But as we do that, we're going to do a shortened version of the results. If you're interested in the full set of results, that is available through the city. So really quickly, just so we kind of level set, how many of us have been to an event at the Event Center campus? Just vote on your clickers. And then what is your current opinion of the baseball stadium? Just before we start getting into things. Great, no need of updates, good, could be modernized, fair, more significant updates are needed, or poor, fully updated or rebuilt, or not sure. There's no wrong answers, these are all just completely your opinion. Okay. And then your opinion of the current state of the arena. Similar qualities, great, no need of updates, good, could be modernized, fair, more significant updates. Perfect. We'll go ahead and jump in here then. I'm going to just take a couple of notes so that I don't have to write everything down. I'm going to record this. As I mentioned, we did a survey in the month of June to get an idea of what the public's opinion was currently of both the stadium, the arena, and the events campus as a whole. And as part of that, it was distributed through Kello, the Argus, through many public venues, and then we had 1,200 total respondents, and what we analyzed was about 640 total responses. Statistics speaking, that's about 95% confidence level at a plus or minus 3.9%. So when we look at the numbers, you can use that as a guide to say, well, how true is this? How representative is this? For those people that could participate in the survey, we didn't limit it to geography. So you can see the response rates across not only South Dakota, but parts of northern Iowa as well. Those that are popping out, we do get some out of towners, Watertown, Pierre, Aberdeen, those sorts of areas. It is pretty evenly split between men and women, slightly male skew, but we have a really good representation of those 25 to 54. And for us, what we can see is they're engaged. They're actively aware and familiar of what's happening in the community. So when we look at their information, we can use that as a guide. How this compares to the Sioux Falls population, pretty similar. We're slightly overrepresented in the 35 to 44 and the younger buckets, but that is okay because when we talk about some of these updates, we want to make sure that it's going to be things that people can enjoy for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So these are going to be the folks that are using it and their kids using it as well. Just a quick note on the overall survey results. We had the grand majority of people who took the survey had been to the campus and had attended in the last 2 years. Most have been here about 10 plus events. That could be at the arena, that could be at the Premier Center, that could be at the baseball stadium, what have you. There's a lot of different places. The most commonly visited one was, of course, the Premier Center, and then followed by Convention Center and arena. We wanted to get an understanding of what people thought of the events campus as a whole, so we asked them, what are we doing really well and what can we improve on? And part of this is doing a quantitative scorecard on things like parking and accessibility and affordability, that criteria. So before we show you that feedback, tell us from your perspective, how important is it that we have an events center campus for visitors and residents? A, very important, somewhat important, neutral, somewhat unimportant. What's your opinion of the city evolving or updating the Event Center campus facilities? Just overall opinion about that idea. Positive, negative, neutral. Okay. This is where we start to look at the criteria of the overall experience of the events campus. You see things like quality of events, access, transportation, and parking. Participants were able to rate these on a scale of excellent, good, fair, or poor. The green and yellow represent positive metrics, so good or excellent, while oranges and reds are more negative. You can see the areas where we have higher representation of oranges and reds are things like access, parking, and affordability. Now, we're not doing poorly in those overall because the numbers are skewed higher. Over 50% is good or excellent, but they're more representative in those other areas. So it's something we want to look at. The other thing that we looked at was the access to the events campus. Things like, are we able to walk? Can people get there if they park a distance away or maybe get dropped off? Is it easy to access? Transportation, and then transportation from downtown. The high percent of people who say no experience, it's probably either because maybe they don't have an interest in coming from downtown, maybe they haven't tried it, or maybe they're just not aware of options, or they haven't considered it before. So again, that'll be something that we dive into tonight. What's going really well are things that a lot of the staff at the facilities and a lot of things the city has put time into, along with other partners throughout the community, to really make sure we have top-notch events. We asked people open-ended what they enjoy most, so they could have said anything, and this is what rises to the top. A little over a quarter are saying things like the concerts and the shows or the conventions or the events, or even just the variety, the diversity. You see them calling out specific facilities as we go further down. Denny Sanford Premier Center at 10%, Canaries Baseball, 8%, Summit League, 6%, and so on. With every property, there's always ways to improve though. There's things that we're doing well, and we can really look back at that scorecard to see what are the areas that got poor or just fair scores. And it's these three: access, parking, and affordability. There was a special section in the survey where we dove into parking and talked a little bit about what's really limiting us or what's creating some of the challenges. We asked if it was the amount or premium parking. Is it the amount of premium parking? Is it the proximity, or is it just available drop-off locations? Same thing here. The greens and the yellows represent positive scores, so things that are going well. The black boxes are those that don't have experience, so they just need more information. We did explore an option about the potential for rapid transit. That's something we've heard in talking with stakeholders throughout the city, along with residents, and getting their ideas. Is, would that ever be something people would want to try? And over 70% said, yeah, I'd either be open to it or maybe. So that's something we can explore further. If we look at the feedback specifically for the baseball stadium, when we talk about people's opinion of its current state, 59% have been there, and in general, 1 to 3 events. So they're relatively familiar. They've been there recently, within the last 2 years. Their feedback is informed. Their experience at the stadium is rated on things like modern facilities and comfortable, cleanliness, access, parking, and then the experience overall. The thing you'll notice that we also called out here is the high proportion of green and yellow. Again, those are positive indicators. Seeing such high numbers shows that there is some good things, and there's things that the residents and the guests really enjoy about this stadium. One of the things that we wanted to include throughout the survey, we had 2 instances where people gave their feedback on what we should do with the stadium and then also the arena. The first time, it was just their own opinion. The second time, we gave them additional information, which we'll also share with you tonight, that talks about how the facility is used, some of the economics that go into it, and then we asked them a second time. From the survey piece, what we can see is that for those responding, 37% said they wanted us to demolish the existing stadium and rebuild elsewhere, while another 32% said we should renovate the existing facility. Okay. People do value the baseball stadium. They see it as important, and they recognize its impact to the city. So for us, the next question was, well, how does that compare to the arena? We've used a similar line of questioning, but in the context of the arena, and asked people not to consider the convention center, just the arena. And for that, about 74% have been there in the last 2 years, but again, maybe less frequent, about 54% is just 1 or 3 events. These same qualities and the same scorecard gives us a benchmark to now compare to the stadium versus the arena side by side. You already maybe noticed that there's a higher proportion of orange and reds. Again, more negative scores for things like facilities or even things like parking. When we put these side by side against the baseball stadium and look at the difference between the two, you can see there is a noticeable difference. In each of the characteristics, the arena has more negative scores than that of the stadium. And remember, these are people who've been there in the last 2 years. These are experiences they've had and they've witnessed themselves. So same thing here, we had people not only tell us what they think we should do before they learned about additional information, but then we told them the economics, we told them other events that have been happening there, just to level set for anyone who may have not been familiar. And this is what they told us. The desire for the arena was really to add convention space, either repurpose as an extension or demolish and replace with more convention space. Just 1%, very, very, very few people said abandon it, which is good. That's the practical-minded South Dakotans in all of us. Yes, we gotta use those resources. So 62% favor adding convention space in one way or another in the arena's current location. So how can we maximize the experience? We want to continue to deliver on guest experience not only for residents, but for those that are traveling in from Omaha or Sioux City or even North Dakota. We asked open-ended, what's the best way to improve the experience at the events campus? They could have said anything. It was totally open-ended. And this is the stuff that rises to the top. 62% said something about dining options. 58% said expand the parking. 52% said more to do, shopping, retail, entertainment, and then followed by transportation at 41%. Ideas that people had, we want to make sure that we're hearing from residents from all over. We know there's great ideas out there in the community. So we went to them and said, well, what other things should we add at the events campus? About a quarter of those responses said dining, nightclubs, bars, evening entertainment, followed by quality events like diversity of events, even things like quantity of events, quantity of things to do, looking for ways they can linger longer, essentially, at this campus. That's just a high-level summary of what we found in the survey. Like I said, there is the full results that's available through the city. There's really 6 points that rise to the top. Number one, the visitors do appreciate the events campus. They recognize the value it has to the city and how it has changed the landscape. They also attend it frequently and recognize the importance of the baseball stadium. Respondents favor keeping a stadium, but there's mixed opinions on if we should rebuild at the current location or if we should relocate it elsewhere. We're going to talk about that today. Respondents favor expanding the convention center instead of the arena, and the city can continue to improve upon the experience by adding restaurants, activities, retail, and more things to do on the actual campus. What's important for us at different times throughout the survey, we asked, would you spend more time if we had restaurants, if we had places where you could hang out or maybe sit outside before an event? And people said yes, they would do that. So there is a positive benefit to talking about this and expanding on this conversation through this town hall today. So any questions on the survey portion before we jump in? Yeah.
So you said you had 1,200 respondents and you picked 640. Is there a reason why you got rid of those others?
Yeah, nope, we didn't get rid of them. So all of the survey responses were shared with the city and we used them in aggregate. But the 640 were used to tally the responses because we had about a week from the time the next council meeting was. So we wanted to get the first draft of the results. But the other respondents were not thrown away by any means. They were all part of the full package of results delivered.
Is the report going to be redone so that the other respondents are put in so we could actually get that understanding of what was voiced?
Yeah, that would be a great question for the city, and Ryan, I don't know if you or others.
I don't know if I know the answer to that.
Okay, we can follow up with you. If you want to leave your card with me after, we'll be sure to follow up. The statistics of the analysis isn't going to change significantly. So because we're at a 95% confidence level at plus or minus 3.9%, the additional responses aren't going to change the statistical percentages of the actual responses.
I do a lot of data mining, and sometimes when I do it and I see the aggregate, you start seeing more coming from this part of town or from this part of the country, or and you start getting a different feel. And it would be interesting to know the ones that were from out of town that you excluded, what their thoughts were.
We didn't exclude people from out of town. So that map that we showed at the beginning, that is representative of the 640. So we didn't exclude people from out of town.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it would be interesting to know what their thoughts were versus what the town thought.
Yeah.
That's always gives me, when I'm doing my statistical analyses, what is important.
Yeah, that's
the difference
a great
between
point.
it.
There was also a question on there, because I went and looked at it, about if you're a registered voter. And I'm wondering why that was important, since I didn't see anything in here that made a difference.
Yep, so that was a question that was added by Lawrence and Schiller. It's something that we add anytime we're doing public opinion research. It was not tied back to any of the results. It's mostly to show engagement. Are the people who are responding actively engaged in the community, and are they aware of some of the things happening in the city? Yep,
but with those voters, you know, was there anything additional that you knew about them to know if they were people that only voted in local elections or only in national elections? Because in South Dakota we have over 70% of the people who are reasonably comfortable going and voting in November, and we have anywhere from 4 to 11% that are comfortable voting in a local election.
Yeah, great question. We didn't ask their most recent voting habits. It was, are you registered?
Okay, so in South Dakota, with 620,000 registered voters, something else I work with,
Yeah.
that it's the pretty high statistics that we have registered voters here. We actually have 118,000 registered voters in the city of Sioux Falls. So that is more of a statistical piece that I am interested in, is how those people work and think.
Yeah, these are great questions. I think let's connect after and we can talk more about getting expanded data with the city.
And I can confirm with you that in the final report that's issued, the full information from all the respondents will be published.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, we're going to keep going. I know I don't want to keep you here past 7. So we're going to keep moving forward. Again, take out your clickers. We're going to be answering some questions. This sort of is the first attack at this set of information, was doing the survey. And so once we had that as a level set and we're talking through it today, we want to go more in depth on some of these same things. So we're going to start with the Arena and Convention Center. And just so that we get an understanding of your familiarity, tell us a little bit, how often have you visited the Arena in the last 2 years? Perfect. How about the Convention Center? Tell us how often you have visited the Convention Center in the last 2 years. And then, without going into further information yet, tell us, what is your current opinion or perception of the Arena facility? Great, no need of updates, good, could be modernized, fair, or poor? No wrong answers, it's just your opinion. All right. So one of the things that was shared in the survey that we want to share with you as well, in case you didn't have the chance to participate, is more details about the Arena itself. So Jack will turn over a board here, and I know it's a little bit small print, but luckily we have it on the screen. So just to get everyone on the same page, the Sioux Falls Arena opened in 1961 as a 7,500-seat facility for athletics, concerts, and special events. Before the construction of the Denny Sanford Premier Center and the Sanford Pentagon, it was home to Skyforce Basketball, Storm Football, Stampede, Summit League, and the Summit League Championship. Today, the facility is primarily used as an extension of the convention center for flat floor space. It also continues to host events such as graduation ceremonies and occasional basketball games. The facility acquires a little over $1.1 million each year to operate and generates $582,000 each year in revenue, an annual loss of about $614,000. The city has also invested $2.1 million on facility maintenance improvements over the past 5 years. Okay. So now, with these additional pieces of information, tell us, from your perspective, what do you think we should do with the arena? Should it be maintained as is, repurposed as an extension of the convention center, demolished and replaced for more convention space, demolished and replaced with parking, or sealed off and abandoned, or not sure? Okay. What's your opinion on expanding the current convention center facilities in Sioux Falls? Agree, strongly agree, neutral, disagree?
When you're asking that question, are you saying repurposing the arena to expand the convention center?
Nope, it just
or
means expanding it could be in
in
any
any
variety.
form?
Mhm. Yep. Good clarification. Okay.
Did you see that 2 of those questions were identical?
Which one?
2 of those questions are identical.
A and E are
Oh,
both.
A and E.
E is supposed to be a disagree.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, good catch. Thank you. Perfect. So I'm glad you're asking some of these clarifying questions because we do want to know the perspective of that. Why is it important to have convention space? That's something we saw in the survey itself, and it seems like there's some feedback here that it's also important to have this convention space. Talk to me about why we're rating that high, or why we're expressing some interest.
The arena is a building that was built as a 100-year-plus building. Those who, I knew people who were involved in the building of that building and know that it has a good 60 or 80 years left in it.
Wasn't it a storm shelter? Wasn't it supposed to be built as a
It's
storm
actually
shelter?
designed under Cold War requirements for civil defense.
Oh.
So that building is the same design as you go to Air Force bases and see their bunkers for their airplanes and the hangars. It's that kind of a design. For us to tear that building down would be a disaster for our civil defense. I see being able to use that building, having walked through that building and studied the design of it, that building is incredibly strong. It would take a lot to tear it down, and it would be a shame to tear it down. Going in and putting a second floor in that building, as some discussion has been had, I think is an excellent idea.
Good feedback.
It has the height and the space to give a ballroom up on the second floor. You could do flat floor space to be able to more easily walk between the buildings.
Perfect.
A lot of the concrete that's already in that building as the structure for the bleachers and the second level is all in very solid and can be reused,
Good
repurposed.
feedback.
So
I'm glad you guys are really well informed and really passionate about this issue because this is why we're having these. This is why we want to talk to you.
And that's what and that's what I've heard about it too, is that it's a really solid building. So for us to tear it down and rebuild would be very expensive. I mean, just to tear it down would be expensive. And since it is a very solid building, you can do a lot with it. I mean,
Yeah.
restructure, like he said, add another floor. I know that's been an idea that's been thrown around. Take out the seating. The seating's old, it should be taken out anyway. And you can always make the facade look different. I wouldn't suggest using the same siding as we did on the event center, but
Yeah, it sounds like you guys
but
have
you
some
can
good
fix the
ideas.
facade.
Yeah.
Yes.
You guys have some great ideas, and you dovetailed perfectly right into this question of what ideas do you have? Adding a second floor, looking at the construction, the siding. That's exactly the type of feedback. I want to keep going and get a little bit more detail about the convention center, and some of those details. One of the things that came up in the survey was the idea of location and where it's situated within the city. So from your perspective, how well does the current location and facility fit those expectations and needs we just discussed?
let me ask you a clarification on that one, because there's nothing we can do about that building and that set of buildings sitting where they're at. That we aren't gonna tear them down and move them someplace else. So that's a strange question to bring into the discussion when that fight was had 9 years ago or 8 years ago.
No longer than that, 20 years ago.
Well, but I mean, the vote and everything and the mayor's decision to put the rest of the facility there. So I would probably look at, that's a strange question to be asking in this process, because we aren't gonna get rid of any of that.
Yep, and that's understood. These are questions that were created by Lawrence and Schiller, and it's just to create context. So we're not saying we're gonna reopen the location conversation, but that's a good point, and we'll keep that in mind as we're looking at the data.
So I don't know how to really answer that, because it's there and it's not gonna move.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's okay.
So maybe that needs to be made as one of the points, instead of A, B, each one of these saying it. It's, if you want a better discussion in the community, I'm just saying, you might want to say, there's nothing we can do about where it's at, what can we do to enhance it?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I like that. How important is it that the convention center be walkable from other retail, dining, and public areas? Again, this is just how important is it in your opinion? No right or wrong answers. Okay. So one of the things that also came up in the survey was this idea of location regarding convention space. Where in the city is it important to have convention space? Are there other places in the city?
Yeah, most cities do it the way you're supposed to do it. You build it downtown around your business and your retail areas. That's where the convention center should have been built. But like he said, it's foregone conclusion now. That's over with. That debate's been done. But
Okay.
that's where it should have been.
Okay.
So we've left that discussion and back to this one. Is it important to have convention space? Yes, because it brings in a lot of people from out of town, and we aren't going to change it from there. So it's important to bring in fresh money into the community.
Okay. I'm glad you're bringing that up. That dovetails really nicely into our next series of questions. There's a couple options that have been thrown out and that came up in the survey as well, and we just want to get the public's feedback. So if the city were to expand the convention center, should it expand on the current site, expand in another location elsewhere in the city, add convention space downtown, or expand at both the current location and downtown, or not add convention space? No wrong answers. Make sure it's your own opinion, what you believe. Okay. Would it be beneficial for Sioux Falls to have 2 convention center campuses, both at the current location and downtown? Okay. Is it important that a convention center expansion be owned and operated by the city of Sioux Falls? Very, somewhat, neutral, somewhat unimportant, not important at all. If the city were to add convention center space anywhere in Sioux Falls, who do you think should fund the expansion? The city, private funding, combination of city and private, or I'm not sure? Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the stadium. We heard in the survey that it is important, or the public feels it's important, that we have a baseball stadium. Talk to me a little bit about why is that? Why is it important that we have a baseball stadium in Sioux Falls? You can just shout it out here, Rachel.
One of the things that I'm looking at with the baseball venue, and it has nothing to do with the team that's out there, but there was an attempt when this stadium was rebuilt 20-some years ago to make it an outdoor venue that we now have as the Levitt. That was, Bob Dylan played there, and a lot of groups played back in those days when they were starting to build it, and it was a fun thing to go do. And it was actually a really great venue for a lot of that stuff.
I saw quite a few concerts out there, yeah.
And it was wonderful. I can't remember all the concerts I went to, but there were a bunch,
Yeah.
and it was fun to do. Well, with the way that it's like the grass has become sacred ground and nobody can stand on it, so they quit doing anything and they started moving the events to later in the fall after all of the baseball was done, and pretty soon nobody wanted to use it anymore. So it became a very protected thing, and people forgot about it. People still love the idea of baseball, but you know, the problem is, had the town worked to keep people interested in that building and that process and that progress of what we had for baseball, we could probably still have people wanting to go there. I arranged for tickets for people from Lifescape to go there a few times a year. You know, so they really enjoy going there and doing it. But the facilities aren't set up for a lot of those people to be able to use the restrooms and so on.
Sure.
So there's a real problem with it. I'd love to keep the baseball stadium, the idea of the stadium. It's not really costing us anything to have it there, but we are going to have to do some investments in it. So
Yeah, good
that's
feedback.
the problem.
Yeah,
with it.
and I think it's important too. I don't watch sports either. I don't go to any minor league games. I don't watch sports at all. But, like he said, there used to be a lot of other things that happened there besides baseball.
Sure.
And I guess I've never really thought about it, but I'd have to say probably over the past 10 years, there has not been any of those things anymore. And for people who don't watch baseball or don't watch sports at all or don't care about any of that stuff, you got to have something for them to want to invest in it, because it's never going to make money. You're always going to lose money on it. It's a public facility. At least have other things to do out there. I mean, like he said, it's just grass. I mean,
Right.
put enough water on it, it'll regrow. You know, so
Good
I think
ideas.
that if they fix it up, they need to, if they decide to do that, whoever decides to do that they need to get back at doing other events there.
Okay. Good feedback. I like some of those ideas. How important is it that the city is involved in that? You brought up a good point of like whomever that is that helps or that maybe addresses it. Like, how important is it that the city be involved in that? Or maybe it's not.
I think it's okay if they're involved in it, but I think they need to have a piece of the pie. Because the way I look at the event center right now, we're not really getting a piece of the pie. We're getting sales tax revenue and we're getting sales tax revenue and we're getting some sponsorship stuff. We're not getting money that's being made there. And I think it's fine that the city's involved as long as they're getting something back out of it. Because right now they're really not. In the event center they're really not. Most of the money that's made there is going to promoters and to the vendors. And, you
Good
know,
feedback. Yeah.
Well, I look at this, back to the discussion of the stadium fitting in with everything else out there. You know, the whole complex is run by SMG. All the promoters that come in to town to put on shows or anything else that goes on out at that complex, very little of the money that's raised through everything going on in that building actually stays in Sioux Falls. We get nothing. And that's what has so many people upset about that whole complex out there, is that nothing that's done in that complex actually comes back into the pockets of people here in Sioux Falls or even into the coffers of the city to help offset the cost of that complex. If you're going to run into opposition on this entire process of what to do out there in that complex, you got to find a way to put some money back into the pot of this town and to encourage local promoters to bring in shows, bring in outdoor things that you can do at the baseball stadium, to whatever else. We really feel in town, as a person who's very active with a lot of things in town, we don't see anything out of that building.
That's
in
great
that complex.
feedback. Good feedback, you guys. I'm glad you're bringing that up. Thank you. Let's keep going and talk a little bit about the baseball stadium in depth. So we'll use our clickers here again. How often have you visited the baseball stadium in the last 2 years? Just level set. One of the things that we showed in the survey, and I mentioned it briefly, was the economics of the arena, and then some of the details of what it's been used for in the past. The same is true with the baseball stadium. So, Jack, I'll have you go ahead and flip this next board over. The Sioux Falls Baseball Stadium opened in 1964. Updates to the stadium have been made over the years, with a major renovation in 2000 for a venue capacity of 4,400. Today, the stadium is primarily used for spring home games for the University of Sioux Falls, as well as the summer home games for the Sioux Falls Canaries. The facility requires $313,000 each year for the city to operate and generates $78,000 in revenue, an average annual loss of $235,000. The city has also invested $664,000 on facility maintenance and improvements over the last 5 years. So with this additional information, what is your opinion of the state of the current baseball stadium? Great, no need of updates, good, could be modernized, fair, more significant updates are needed, poor, needs to be fully updated or rebuilt, or don't know. If the city was to no longer invest in a baseball stadium, what impact would it have on you and your entertainment? A, no impact, I'd find other things to do in Sioux Falls. A little impact, I'd miss it, but I wouldn't travel elsewhere to see a game. Some, I enjoy the game and would travel outside of Sioux Falls to visit a professional game. A lot of impact. I love baseball, and I wouldn't want to miss out on a major piece of entertainment, or not sure. If the city was to invest in a baseball stadium, we should renovate the existing, demolish the existing and rebuild on the same site, demolish and rebuild a new one somewhere else, or demolish and not build a new stadium, or I'm not sure. If the city was to update the stadium, should it remain on the current site, move to another location elsewhere in the city, or just not invest in a stadium?
May I make a suggestion on that? I wouldn't say update the stadium. I would just say, if the city were to do something with the stadium, should we remain on the stadium? Because update says you're not going to move that stadium to another part of town.
Sure.
So, it's either remain on the current site but I would take the word update out of there.
Sure. Good feedback.
Just for clarity for somebody looking at it. Sorry, I write these kind of questions.
No, that's good. Good feedback. I think we're waiting on one more response. If you haven't gotten your vote in, make sure you do. All right. Perfect. For those who do not frequently attend baseball games currently, would you start attending the stadium if it were located elsewhere? Is it important that the baseball stadium be owned and operated by the city of Sioux Falls? Very somewhat neutral, somewhat unimportant, not important at all. If we were to update the baseball stadium, how do you think it should be funded? The city, private, combination of city and private, or I'm not sure. The last section that we have is on the events campus. So you've given a lot of excellent feedback. I want to check our time. Okay, we're getting close, so we're going to buzz through this section because I want to leave time for Q&A at the end. Which of these is in need of the most improvement at the current events campus? You can pick your top 3. Type of events, walkability, access, parking, nearby entertainment, affordability, transportation, and then nearby lodging or hotel. So you can pick 3. Which is in need of the most improvement? These are things that came up in the survey, so if we're looking at these, what do we need to think about? Would there be a benefit to adding more lodging or hotel options near the events campus? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about parking. When attending events at the campus, do you typically park on site, park on a side street, use a ride share, get dropped off, use public transportation, walk or ride a bike, or do not use or visit the events campus? Okay, parking on site. All of you do park on site, so we're going to buzz through that. Which of the following are the three most important factors? So parking came up a lot in the open ends and then also in the ranking questions of the survey. So we wanted to understand what is the most important factor when it comes to parking. There's parking experiences we have maybe with individuals at times, so don't think of it in that context, but is it more important to have enough or available parking spots, proximity, traffic flow, access in and out, limited access or access to pick up and drop off areas, transportation to and from the campus from other parts of town, knowledge of free parking or parking spaces, or premium parking with membership perks. You can pick three. Which are the three biggest challenges when it comes to parking? So you just told us what's important. These are the same criteria here. What are the biggest challenges? If we had to rise the ones to the top that we prioritize and want to address, what are the three of this list that we would choose?
May I interject here?
Yeah, do you have a question?
There's very little ADA parking out there.
Well, that's one.
That is my biggest parking complaint out there. I bring people who are disabled to the event center. And when I take them to the event center, I have gone through ankle deep and higher snow, pushing a wheelchair and helping a handicapped person walk across the parking lot because the paratransit buses are parked in front of the doors and won't leave because the drivers are in there watching the games or whatever the event is, and there's no parking spots. And I don't believe there are enough ADA parking spots on the campus to start with. I don't see that on there, and that's, I will tell you, is my biggest complaint and why I think twice about going out to the event center to do anything, because I won't be able to bring my friends and family who need that. And I have actually tried to get the city to do something about it, and they never seem to do anything about it. So that is one of my biggest complaints about parking, and I tell ADA people that all the time.
Good feedback. I'm glad you brought that up. There will be time at the end for open Q&A. Just in the interest of time, I want to keep us moving because we're getting really short on time. So if you haven't responded to this question, go ahead and enter that. Would it be beneficial to add more parking spaces within the campus? So within means on the current property itself. Okay. Would it be beneficial to add more parking near the campus? So it might not be on the actual property itself, but maybe it's on across the street, or maybe it's in near here, but relatively close. Okay. Would you consider using alternate transportation options in other parts of the city to pick you up? This could be something like that rapid transit that we talked about in the first survey. One more response here. Okay. If we were to include a rapid transit option, where should the hub be? Where would be the most beneficial place to pick up and drop off? The mall, downtown Sioux Falls, or an alternative location? Okay. How would it impact your decision if there was a small cost to use the rapid transit option? More likely to use, somewhat more likely, same likelihood, somewhat less likely, much less likely to use, or no, I absolutely would not use. Okay. These are all the questions that we have for you guys today. You did a really great job of providing feedback as we went throughout, so thank you for doing that, and thank you for being so candid. It's at this point that we'll switch gears and let you know that, again, this is just the second part of this. We have 2 other town hall sessions tomorrow that we'll be gathering feedback, but if you guys have any questions either on the research or for the citizen group that is on the panel, we can take those now.
Are all of these 4 meetings the same?
They're at different locations.
Different locations, but the same
Yep,
general?
the same content. Yep, we want to make sure that we're giving everyone a chance to participate if it's work schedules or, like you said, transportation, so.
How
different
is,
times
how
of
has
day.
the turnout been at each one, at the previous
only
one
been
you
one.
had?
Yes, yep, there's only been one so far, so it was a small crowd this morning, it was about one or 2 people, so,
Okay.
yeah,
That's a shame.
yeah.
Rain didn't help us.
I would say, the
Yeah.
storm
Yeah,
this
we
morning,
got rain.
the torrential downpour.
There were too many people going from point A to point B this morning,
I-
unfortunately.
I was pushing water out of my house, so.
Oh. Other questions or things we didn't cover that we want to make sure we have?
So
to
when
know?
you say we could go to the city and ask for the results once this is all done,
Mhm.
who do I get that from the city?
Yeah, we can connect you, the contact at the city, or Ryan too, feel free to jump in if it's wrong, but TJ Nelson with the city, City of Sioux Falls, he's our contact, he's out of office today, I apologize, otherwise he would have been here, but we have his contact information, and if you leave your contact info with me, I can.
I have his email.
Oh, perfect, wonderful. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for taking time tonight, I know it's hard on a nice summer night, so thank you so much for being here, appreciate it. Have a good night.